Welcome to the Courage to Change with Karen podcast, the place where we get real about addiction recovery and celebrate the victories against struggle. I'm Karen Gardenier, your navigator on this journey of healing, committed to uplifting families touched by addiction. Together, let's unravel the intricate dance of mind, body, and spirit with compassion, tenacity, and steadfast commitment. Hello, this is Karen with the Courage to Change with Karen podcast. Welcome. Today is April 19th. Well, today's not April 19th, but I'm going to read April 19th out of the Courage to Change Daily Reader. Learning about alcoholism has helped me to find serenity after years of struggling. I see now that alcoholics have a disease. They are ill, not bad. By attending Al-Anon meetings on a regular basis, reading Al-Anon conference-approved literature, and sitting in open AA meetings, I have gained some insight into what is and is not reasonable to expect when dealing with an alcoholic. I've learned that I have the ability to adjust my expectations so that I no longer set myself up for a constant disappointment. For instance, I have stopped expecting a drinking alcoholic to keep every promise. This makes my life more manageable. The knowledge I gain in Al-Anon has dispersed many of my fears and made room for a newfound compassion. I see that I'm not the only one with the good ideas, valid criticism, and noble motives. Today's reminder: learning about the disease of alcoholism can help me become more realistic about a loved one's illness and thus to make better choices for myself. Well, this is very important right here. Learning about the disease of alcoholism can help you become more realistic about your loved one's illness, and then you can make better choices for yourself. Love it. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. First thing, this Al-Anon conference-approved literature, that's one of the things I'm reading from. Courage to Change is from Al-Anon family groups, and it is approved literature from Al-Anon. And I just thought I'd throw that in. Well, this is the very first thing. Whether you meet with me one-on-one and you do a one-on-one consultation with me, you do any kind of coaching with me in my group workshops, in any boot camp, anything that I do when I talk to people, is the first thing is I explain alcoholism. So many people do not understand what alcoholism is. If you can listen to me and be open-minded and take it from a person who has alcoholism and addiction, you can start to separate from the situation you're in. So what I mean by that is, I hear from a lot of people that are in relationship with someone who is alcoholic or addict, and they take it very personally that this person is doing this to them. They don't love them. If they could quit, if they really love me, they would quit. They're purposely doing this. It's like a personal affront to them. And I have to explain to them, this is not what this is. I mean, yes, this is terrible, but it really doesn't have much to do with you. This person would have alcoholism, whether they were with you, someone else, by themselves, if they were in the South Pole, if they're in the North Pole, if they were in Europe, if they're in Canada. Alcoholism is alcoholism. I believe it has a genetic history to it. Usually in families, you can see it run back, even though it skips generations. It does not, it doesn't discriminate, whether gender, the amount of money you have, race, religion, creed, regardless of any of that, or how much you know about alcoholism. I've known people that were very educated about alcoholism and taught as alcoholic counselors and therapists, and they were alcoholics. So it doesn't matter how much you know. When this thing rears its head, it's going to be a problem. I think people are born with alcoholism. I think it's in their genetic makeup. And I think some people, though, it never comes to fruition. Just like if you have, a cancer gene in you, like the breast cancer gene, doesn't mean you're going to get breast cancer, but there's a very good likelihood that you could. And some people are just go through their life. You see some people that can go through their whole life and their alcoholism doesn't kick in until they retire. Once they retire, they start drinking. Once something happens in their life, they start drinking, or it just slowly sneaks up over time. Or with me, it just got me right out of the gate. I had alcoholic behaviors and tendencies long before I drank. So what is alcoholism? Alcoholism is a mental health issue. It is a mental illness. It's on the spectrum for mental illness. If somebody is having problems with addiction or alcoholism at an extreme level, and they say they lock them up in mental health units, right? They don't put them anywhere else. It's behavioral health. In the old days, they used to be mental hospitals. And that is why they treat it there. Now, it's a twofold disease. It's mental and it's physical. So what happens to an alcoholic who digests and assimilates? Sorry, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the actual terms for it. But when they assimilate alcohol, they do it differently than normal people. They do not react the same. Their bodies don't, I won't say tolerate it, but they can't digest it or process it. That's the word. It doesn't process the same way. And the reason I don't say tolerate is because some people can tolerate a lot of alcohol, and the same person on another day might have a glass of wine, maybe a glass and a half, and go into a blackout. With alcohol, you really don't know, right, how the alcoholic's going to respond. I'll do another podcast on how you can tell. You can see alcoholism in someone even when they're little, like at Chuck E. Cheese. You can see these little kids run around and you think, oh boy, oh boy. So we'll talk about that some other time. But right now, I just want you to understand what this is so you can separate from it. So the physical aspect is we take in alcohol and we develop a craving where we have to continue to have more alcohol. It's a craving. And that craving, once triggered, kicks off an obsession of the mind. So we start obsessing about it. The obsessing, if you take away the alcohol and send someone to detox, they might physically get off alcohol. But if the mental part of this disease is not treated, the obsession is still there, and the first chance they get, they drink and use. You hear a lot of people leave treatment and they stop on the way home at the bar and they pick up, okay? So the only way to get that cycle to stop is abstinence. There's people that, say that they went to some kind of clinic and now they drink 2 glasses of wine a day, or they're controlled drinkers. I don't believe those people were ever real alcoholics. There are heavy drinkers, there are problem drinkers, and then there are alcoholics. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm adopted. The family I grew up in were not alcoholics. But a few years ago, I found my biological mother, and she had died. It was a fluke thing how I found her. They sent me my birth certificate. Washington State will send you your birth certificate after the parent dies. And so she had died, and they sent me her birth certificate, and I found out that she had died of alcoholism, right? So made sense to me. She never found an answer. I found a solution. So once you pick up a drink again, a relapse, it sets off that whole cycle again. The physical craving and the mental obsession. A lot of reasons people can't stay sober is they stop drinking, but they don't treat the mental obsession. And then you have a dry drunk. They're absolutely miserable. If you've ever known a dry drunk, you think, oh my God, I wish they'd have a drink. They're so miserable. And, that's the way it is. So that in a nutshell, so the person that you love or are in relationship to that's an alcoholic addict has an illness called alcoholism, right? Now, alcoholism, which centers in your mind, now you understand that, it centers in your mind, that can be treated many different ways, okay? It can be treated with alcohol. That's actually the treatment, right? People think that drinking's the problem. The drinking's not the problem. For an alcoholic, the drinking's the solution. The problem is the alcoholism that centers in their mind. Okay, that needs to be treated. That you can treat it with alcohol, you can treat it with marijuana, you can treat it with street drugs, heroin, meth, ketamine, fentanyl, a mix of all of those. There's just a zillion of them. And you can also treat them with prescription drugs. People get hooked on prescription drugs. A lot of mothers will get hooked on their kids' ADD medicine. You can treat it with shopping. You can treat it with gambling. You can treat it with sex. You can treat it with porn. You can treat it with gaming. There's a lot of ways. Now, how you can tell that someone's treating their alcoholism with those things is they have terrible consequences. So you might say, well, I smoke pot and I'm not an alcoholic. Well, no. Just like you could probably drink wine and you're not an alcoholic, right? If you smoke pot, if you're an alcoholic and you smoke pot, it will have catastrophic consequences. It may not the minute you take the puff, it will lead you back to drinking or drug use because you can't get enough. You just can't get high enough. So people will smoke for a year or two, but eventually it's all ending up bad. It's not the same result as a normal person smoking pot. So there's a lot of ways to treat it. Now, why is there then Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous? I think that was just a man-made thing that people created so that they were with their own tribe. You know what I mean? People could relate more. Maybe back in the day, a heroin addict couldn't relate to the alcoholic because he didn't drink. But what we later found out is if a heroin addict gets off heroin and starts drinking, they will soon become addicted to the alcohol. So it all switches around. You see people that get sober and they start gambling or they start shopping, right? This is called switching addictions. So that might explain a little bit of alcoholism. So if you look at it the way it is, alcoholism and relapse is because you've quit treating the mental part of it. You've stopped drinking and you quit treating the mental part. And what happens is your own mind tells you you're not sick and you start drinking again. Very much like a schizophrenic or anybody else with any kind of, mental illness. You see someone maybe with schizophrenia and they're talking to the trees and they're in the park and they're right out of their mind and they get them and they take them to a mental health facility, behavioral health, and they get them cleaned up and they get them on medicine and they normal out and they feel great and everybody's thrilled and the family is happy and they let them go home. And it's 4 to 6 months, they decide they're well and they don't want to take their medicine anymore and they quit their meds. That is what a relapse is with an alcoholic. So the particular answer that I've found, and millions of other people have found, it's been around for I think almost 90 years now, is Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's because it treats the physical, the mental with a spiritual answer. It's, to me, the best way. The results are unbelievable. They're miraculous because you're changing, everything changes when you're doing a spiritual approach. I personally do not want to get sober and have to take a shot or a pill to try to stay sober. I really value being completely drug-free. Now, being drug-free, I will tell you that I have to be very careful what I do take. If I take a cold medicine, it could knock me out for 2 days. Or I could take something and it won't work at all. So I've had to let my doctors know I'm an alcoholic because my body reacts differently to medicine. So that's just added in information for you. Not that that has anything to do with what I read today, but it's a very interesting disease. It's the only disease that really makes you think you don't have it. If somebody with cancer, if you told somebody, let's say diabetes, you have diabetes and we need to change your diet and you need to start exercising, or you're going to go to the dialysis machine. That's the next stop for you. There's a pretty big motivation to do that because you don't want to go to dialysis. So your mind says, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of our body and we're going to do this and this and this. Well, alcoholism is different because it centers in the mind. And the mind is the one that the sick mind is trying to save a sick mind. Very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. The mind itself is trying to get you to drink, your own mind. I have said this before, and I've heard many other people say it. I don't want to seem dramatic, but it's like my brain is out to kill me. My thoughts and my reactions are really the worst without some kind of program that I got in AA. Now, a lot of people find this in church. A lot of people find a lot of ways to get sober, and I'm not promoting any one way. However someone can get sober, I am all for it. But this thinking of mine is so catastrophic, and I think it's always trying to set me up. It sets me up long before I drink. It's, I guess if you have a loved one with alcoholism, you probably know what I mean. So this is a tricky deal. And the only way I've found to treat that is to stay around other people that are also suffering from the same thing, because I can see it in them before I see it in me. I can see the delusion start setting in. We become delusional. We don't see things quite clearly. We start making excuses. We start blaming others. There's this self-centeredness that comes over us. It's a cunning and baffling disease. So alcoholism is one of the only illnesses that makes you think you don't have it. It's also one of the only illnesses that can take other people down with it. If you have a loved one with cancer, it's terrible. My stepfather died of cancer, and it's a horrible way to go. But he did not infect us all with cancer when we took care of him at home. When we stood by him, we were sad and we were upset, but we weren't affected with cancer. Alcoholism will affect everyone around them. That's why they call it a family illness. Everyone gets sick when someone in the house has alcoholism. They'll get sick different ways, but it affects everyone. It's the only disease when someone relapses, they try to take people out with them. right? Misery loves company. When I ran that treatment center, that was always the way it is. Before someone left, they usually took 3 or 4 people with them, 1 or 2, whoever they could convince, right? So it's really a unique and unusual illness, and it is chronic. It is fatal. You never get over it. You never get rid of it. You have it for life. And so you have to treat it. So that's what you're up against. Many people, the reason I do this work that I do is people don't even know what's wrong with them. There are people that think they just drink too much. They think if they quit drinking, everything will be fine. But they don't realize they have alcoholic thinking. So as soon as they quit drinking, the thinking is still there, and it will lead them back to drinking or drugging or something with terrible consequences. And it's hard to convince someone. You know, no one wants to say they're an alcoholic or addict. But the reason I do this is because I didn't really even know what was wrong with me until after my relapse. I was sober for 14 years, and I relapsed. And it was because I quit treating my thinking. And I eventually ended up drinking again. And then it was way worse than it was before, and I almost didn't make it back. I'm very grateful I did. I'm lucky. So where was my train of thought? Oh my gosh, let me look at my notes. So this alcoholism is to get someone to admit that they're alcoholic is very hard. In fact, I don't think you could convince someone they're alcoholic. They have to convince themselves they're alcoholic. What convinces someone? Their consequences. My own consequences finally got my attention. The second time when I started drinking again, I've been sober again now for double-digit years. But I got sober, 31 years ago. I should have 31 years. And, the first time I got sober it seemed obvious, right? I got a DUI, I lost a job, little things like that. But the second time when I relapsed, it didn't start over where it left off the first time. It started off, it didn't start off where I began last time. It started off where I ended last time. So it got worse much, much faster. And this time, the consequences were much, much worse. I was homeless. I was very sick. I was unemployable. I was penniless. I mean, I had lost all family, all friends, everything. It was over for me. It was curtains, I tell you. I can laugh about it now because I got sober and put this first, my recovery first, and everything's worked out, right? Everything is much better. But when I relapsed, I thought it was the drinking. I just really thought it was the drinking. And this time when I came back, someone explained to me, what alcoholism was. And I didn't even know that. I thought it was the drinking. I thought I was just an asshole when I drank. But I'm just an asshole, period. I'm an alcoholic. Sober or not, I've got to have a way to treat this thing every day. And that's why I come on here to tell people. I talk about it all the time. There are so many people that do not understand the illness. If you look it up and Google it, it doesn't make any sense. It makes it sound like we just drink too much. That doesn't explain switching addictions. It doesn't explain dual diagnosis. it doesn't explain anything about the illness to me when you Google it. So the reason I tell people, the family and loved ones, when I started this, I told you that once you understand this, you can separate. You can like float yourself up in the room and look down on the person and say, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Not look down on them, but you know what I mean? Like a out of body experience, you know, see yourself in the clouds looking down on the house and that person walking around in the house, and you say, oh my God, they have alcoholism, right? They are very sick. Is there anything I can do for them? Probably not, right? They are going to have to figure this out because there's no convincing an alcoholic, right? It's very hard to convince them. They have to convince themselves. Even if they go to court and the judge tells them, you need to go to AA for 90 days. Well, they go and they end up listening and hearing, and they convince themselves. They hear something that goes, oh my God, that's me, right? But the judge isn't telling them. If the judge could tell them, hey, you need to straighten up, this, blah, blah, well, that would work, right? But that doesn't work. So the judge knows what works. He says, you go to AA and listen to these people. Let these people help you, right? And you go to AA and you sit and you listen. And all of a sudden you can hear it. You can see it. It's like alcoholism's in the room, right? There's alcoholism and there's recovery. So there's not a lot you can do. So, but at least you don't take it personally. Don't think it's got anything to do with you, right? They might tell you. I mean, oh my God, the things I hear from people. They might scream at you. You're the reason I drink. I wasn't drinking till I met you. You know, whatever that is, that's not true. The person, if you're up in the clouds looking down at your house and the person walking around, stumbling around, sleep in their recliner, passed out on the floor, whatever, in your garage, shooting up heroin, whatever they're doing, the person is sick. And they'd be sick if you were there or not. And their illness is not just trying to kill them. It's trying to kill you. I don't think that's what people understand. When you're in there trying to help an alcoholic, an addict, you're dealing with the devil. It's like Freddy Krueger. They will take you and them and throw you both under the bus. That illness is a mental illness. It's not, you wouldn't, if you were at the crosswalk and some guy with severe schizophrenia walked up next to you at the streetlight and started screaming and flailing and being violent, would you try to save him? No. You'd say, oh my gosh, this isn't my forte. I don't know anything about this. I don't have schizophrenia. I'm going to back up. I'm going to call somebody maybe that does know about schizophrenia, right? I'm going to call the police and maybe they can come and get him and they'll take him in and give appropriate care, right? If the guy wants help. But you can't help someone that doesn't want help. I think there's the initial conversation where you sit down with someone and you say, hey, you got a problem. You've got a problem, and it's not just your drinking. You need some help. And if they say, you know what, and I have seen people do this. They don't have to go down the ladder like I did. They don't go down to the, sub-basement of life. They go down a couple floors and go, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this, right? My wife is going to leave me. I'm going to lose my job, so I'm going to go to treatment. And they don't lose as much. Maybe they're smarter. I don't know. Maybe they just don't have alcoholism at the, stage 4 alcoholism. Maybe they're in stage 1 or 2. So, people can get off the elevator at any time, but people like me that have egos and pride, and it's impossible to tell us we're wrong, and we think we know everything, and we're riddled with selfishness and self-centeredness. and we blame, and we live in this delusional world where we rationalize everything, right? You would think that once things started getting bad for me, I would have stopped. But I couldn't. The physical craving and the mental obsession were too great. So what happens? I start lowering the bar. I keep lowering the bar, lower and lower, and so I can justify and rationalize what's happening in my life. So once you understand that, you can take a step back and say, holy shit, what am I dealing with? You have the initial conversation of, hey, this is what we need to do. And if they say no, F you, then you need to make some decisions. You do not have to wait until they squander all the money. You don't have to wait until they've gone to so many treatment centers and rehabs that you've mortgaged the house and your retirement's gone. You don't have to wait for that, right? That's not your responsibility. You have to save yourself. And if you have kids in the house, you have to save those kids because they will be affected. And you are teaching them how women treat men and men treat women. You're teaching them relationships. You're teaching them boundaries and how to stand up for themselves. You're either teaching them not to have them or to have them. So when you're up in that cloud looking down at that house, take a good look at the chaos that's going on in there while this person's passed out on their easy chair or out in the garage, shooting meth. And look at the rest of the family. What are they doing? Everyone locked in their room? Kids gaming, people on their phones, nobody's talking, everyone's sick and no one's talking about it. People are angry. This is not good. So you need to get a real good understanding. And that's what Al-Anon will do if you go to Al-Anon. Sorry, I've got my dog with me in the recording room. So, this is just information you have to understand. You have to understand that this is a sick person and you are not the doctor. The only person I believe that can help another alcoholic, to help an alcoholic is another alcoholic. So, for what that's worth today, I'd love to hear your response. Please leave a note. Make sure to subscribe, share it with someone that needs to hear this information. You can always email me at Karen@KarenGardenier.com and tell me what you thought today. Did I tell you anything you didn't know? What do you need to know that I'm not talking about? I'd love to know. Okay? So as usual, I've got a cheat sheet to Al-Anon in the show notes. If you look there, there'll be a link, and it is the 10 most common phrases and terms used in Al-Anon. So if you're new to this world and you know what the words mean, but you don't know how it applies to your life, it's the simplest little dictionary with examples, and I really love it. So check that out. It's free. Download that. It'll get you on my mailing list where I send a newsletter out once a week for more support. And there's also a link for Courage to Change private Facebook group. Okay, this podcast has a support group behind it that you can join, and I put additional information and readings on there. So thank you for your time today. I love you guys. I hope that helps someone out there. And if it did, please let me know. Love you. See you next week.